Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's start our video with a story about how working hard, following orders, and a touch of unexpected consequences can lead to some pretty surprising outcomes. But before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button, smash the like if you enjoy the content, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a juicy story. I need to work slower and look busy for the boss? You got it. For background, I've always been an incredibly hard and efficient worker, always getting things done faster than expected and going above and beyond. My program for college required us to go to class for 6 months of the year and work full-time in our field for the remaining 6 months. As a freshman in college, I got my first job at an automotive supplier. My first semester was fairly slow, mainly due to the fact that the person who was supposed to train me went on medical leave my first week there and didn't come back for almost a year and wasn't replaced. However, in my second semester, things really took a turn for the worse. 2 key things happened at the start of my next semester. 1, I was moved to a new department. 2, the company began merging with one of their competitors. Now, when the company began the merger, they decided they were going to move everything at my site to the other company's HQ in another nearby city. The first thing that moved was vast majority of the equipment my new department used. The upper management made the brilliant decision to leave the 4 members of my department, 1 supervisor, 1 tech, and 2 students at the old site until the move was complete. This meant we had essentially nothing we could work on. Here's where we get into the MC. After about 2 weeks of sitting around, my supervisor, 60-year-old female, finally came up with a small task for me. I completed this in about 4 hours, which I thought was pretty good for something I'd never done and had little training on, so I went to let her know. Me: "Hey, Super, I'm done." Super, angry and in a panic: "Done? This was supposed to take you all week. I don't have anything else for you to do now. I need you to look busy in case boss walks by. Next time I give you something, you need to drag it out for longer so that you look busy." Now, young, naive me was initially confused by getting reprimanded for working too fast, but what the boss says goes. A week or so later, I was given another task. I was to take thousands of these tiny explosive devices we use and dispose of them by detonating them in a concrete box. They were too volatile to just throw out, so they had to be discharged first. Super. And remember, take your time and don't go through them too fast. Now, this was obviously just busy work to get me out of the way, but the great thing with this task was that it had to take place in a back garage that nobody ever went in to avoid the obvious danger of people walking in while I was setting off controlled explosives. I could have easily hooked up 20 of these bad boys at a time and set them off every 5 to 10 minutes, finishing the whole batch in about a week, but I had to look busy. So instead, I set off about 5 to 10 of these once an hour and spent the rest of the time on my phone playing games, watching Netflix, and listening to music, etc., while getting paid over double minimum wage at the time. I managed to stretch that project for the remaining 2.5 months. I was there, finishing just in time for the end of the semester. Anytime someone asked me for help on something else, I politely told them I would when I was done, but it might be a while because Super told me not to go through these too fast. They usually ended up finding some other bored student to help them. I think Super genuinely forgot I worked there by the end, because when I stopped into her office in my last week to let her know I'd finished the task, she seemed very surprised and confused to see me. The company ended up paying me over $10,000, a lot of money for a student at the time, just to sit on my phone all day for 3 months. I sent an email to supervisor, boss, and HR at the end of the semester, letting them know that I would not be returning the next semester. In my best corporate language, I let them know I was leaving to pursue opportunities that would better utilize my time and skills. I found out later, when several of us ran into each other at a job fair, that all but 2 of the other students had also quit at the end of the semester out of boredom and/or uncertainty that we'd even have jobs to come back to. The company did not handle the transition well and could never give us straight answers about where or when or if we would be brought back. Nice one. I hope you looked super busy all the time you were busy doing nothing. And our second story. Office thermostat must be left at 16 Celsius? My boss was brought up in a household where the solution to being cold was putting on another jumper. to the extent the inside of the windows used to freeze. Lord knows how many times I've heard that story. Unfortunately, instead of reveling in the marvel that is central heating, my boss feels it necessary to impose the same draconian rules straight from the 18th century on all of us in the office. In a word, it gets damn cold at work. For context, I work in a converted barn which is both poorly insulated and has a tall vaulted roof. This means any heat dissipates upwards and the building generally needs a lot of heat to stay comfortable. It's not uncommon to be sat indoors wearing my small down jacket and thermal base layers to keep warm. If I was working outside, I could accept this, but in an office environment, it's unnecessary. To make matters worse, I suffer from Raynaud's, which has been getting worse for the last few years. My condition makes it really rather miserable to sit at work for 8 hours with numb fingers and toes, all because of the lack of proper heating in the middle of winter. I'm a long-standing employee, but in all my time working for my company, there's always been another colleague with a far more vocal opinion on how warm the office should be. For the last few years, for instance, a colleague of mine would make a big parade about cranking the heat up to 24 Celsius multiple times a day. This resulted in a daily tit-for-tat between my colleague and boss. Typically, my boss would see the thermostat, exclaim it's too hot, and switch the boiler off at the mains. No heat. I tried in vain to convince my colleague to leave the heating at a reasonable level, say 19 to 20 Celsius, as I was certain my boss was unable to actually tell the heating was set higher than his preferred 15 degrees Celsius unless he could visually see the stat set higher. I was ignored. The tit-for-tat continued, and so did the cold. Roll forward a few years. I'm now the only person left in the office other than my boss, his son, and an administrator who works part-time. The temperature has started to drop and the cold has been drawing in. The heating was switched on Monday this week and like clockwork set bang on 15 Celsius. I decided enough was enough and sat down with my boss to discuss the heating. I explained how cold temperatures affect my Raynaud's and asked if he would be willing to increase the thermostat. Surprisingly, my boss was pretty compassionate and promised to increase the heating starting the very next day. True to his word, my boss did increase the thermostat by 1 effing degree. Apparently 16 Celsius was his limit. To say I was livid was an understatement, but more disheartening was looking towards another winter shivering at my keyboard. I couldn't stand the thought, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. 2 really important bits of information popped into my head that morning that formed the perfect plot in an instant. The thermostat was old school, analog, not digital. My boss and his son were out at a meeting for the whole afternoon and the admin wasn't due in at all. Roll on lunchtime, I took it upon myself to research the model of thermostat. I found an archived manual online. Page 3, calibration. I couldn't believe how simple it was to adjust the unit. There was 1 screw to remove the outer casing, which exposed the dial. The dial then simply lifts off the spindle and is rotated and reinserted onto the spindle to calibrate the unit. Armed with my Swiss Army knife, once I was alone in the office, I got to work, disassembling the unit until I rotated the spindle clockwise by 4 degrees. So now, when set at 16 Celsius, the thermostat would actually measure 20 Celsius. I replaced the casing and using a relative humidity meter we use for work, I tested the switching point of the stat. The office measured at 16.2 degrees Celsius and the stat clicked on at around 12 Celsius. Hearing the boiler fire in the kitchen gave me the biggest grin I've had in ages. That was on Tuesday. The remainder of the week has been glorious. For the first time in 8 years, the office is actually at a constant, comfortable temperature. I'd been waiting to post this in line with the rules as no fallout had occurred. However, this afternoon, my boss asked if I was warm enough, again, unusually compassionate. While I felt kind of bad to go behind his back, it does give me scope to increase the heating even more when it starts getting really cold in the next few months. I was also pretty ecstatic as it proved the hunch I've had for years. My boss has no idea if the heating is set warmer other than the number shown on the stat. Perfection. 20 Celsius is quite reasonable. It's not like you cranked it to some ridiculous setting. So everyone's content, and your productivity will rise, as with Raynaud's, you'll not only be in pain, but also clumsy at 16 Celsius. And our last story. sued HOA and won. So a year ago, I moved to Florida. Not knowing the area well, we didn't want to move across the country into a neighborhood we didn't know. We settled on buying a manufactured home and a lot. We paid $70,000 cash for a 2016 home so we could settle in and find the home we wanted before dropping $300,000 on a traditional house or land to build our own. We've never lived in a home where we didn't own the land. So after Hurricane Eta came through, the fence between our house and the HOA houses directly behind us started falling over. The fence is owned by the HOA. By the time they were done removing the old fence on December 10th, they'd also removed 5 trees that came with our property. Our backyard is now all sand, and there's a large ditch where the fence was. The contractors they hired pulled no permits and did not have the city-marked pipes and cables. In turn, they cut through cable lines, broke water pipes, and plugged up the drainage pipe that was in the ditch. All of this caused our house to start sinking. The ground is wavy, and our backyard is basically quicksand. We called the insurance company out. They looked it over, said it showed the signs of a sinkhole. They then sent out a geological engineer. He could not run all the tests because the company that owns the land would not respond to their request for permission to take soil samples and sonar on the ground. He did say that the middle of the house is an inch higher than the backside of the house. He also told us that the yard is a hazard. If the insurance company finds enough damage to total the house, they will pay out $66,000. Otherwise, they'll try and repair the sinkhole and house. We're scared to stay here and refuse to live on the same land. Even a fixed sinkhole greatly devalues our house. Legally, you have to disclose if a sinkhole, even a repaired one, ever existed. Update. I gathered all necessary documentation and reached out to both my lawyer and the local authorities. My lawyer filed a formal complaint against the HOA for the unauthorized removal of our trees and damage to our property. We also highlighted their negligence in hiring unlicensed contractors who didn't pull necessary permits or mark utility lines, leading to significant property damage. As the case proceeded, we collected testimonies from neighbors and experts to support our claims. The HOA's lack of response to the insurance company's request for soil samples and ground sonar was also noted. Finally, after several court sessions, the judge ruled in our favor. The HOA was ordered to compensate us for the damage to our home and the devaluation caused by the sinkhole. They were also required to pay for the proper repair of the land and ensure no future negligence in their contracting processes. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.